there's a number of things here that Dabo talked about that when you add it all up, for me, just speaks to Clemson being a different program, just different than just about anybody else. When you add up just replacing an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator that were there forever, and you replace them with guys that have been there forever. When you talk, Wes Goodman's been there since December of 08 and Brandon Streeter since December of 14. These other college football coaching staffs aren't like that. And then the player loyalty, talking about 109 players on the spring roster, and they all stayed. Only 4 teams out of 65 in the Power 5 had everybody stay. Nobody entered the transfer portal. Just talking about, he had several things to say about recruiting that made it obvious that just the Clemson way is just a different deal.
Yeah, the fact that not one single player transferred out after the spring, that's remarkable in my eyes. I mean, I still can't believe that. I expected at least a handful of guys to hit the portal after the spring and started getting an idea of what the depth chart might look like. But not a single one of them did. I thought there would be several candidates. I'm not going to mention any names, but but every single one of them, chose to stay, chose to compete, no matter where it looks like they're at on the depth chart at this current time. And I think that speaks volumes about the culture inside that program. And you mentioned recruiting there, and that's a big part of what draws some of these players to Clemson, that culture. And it's not for everybody, not all, it's not going to resonate with all kids, but the kids that it does resonate with, I like to frame it this way. It kind of draws them to the program. I used to say when Clemson was, before Peter Woods made his announcement, he kept coming back on all these visits. There's something that keeps drawing him back to Clemson. And to me, it's that culture. Every time I talk to recruits, culture's always mentioned, and it's always one of the first things mentioned. Dabo Swinney had a vision for that program when he took it over. He had a vision for the type of culture he wanted inside that program, and he's done a remarkable job of putting it in place and maintaining it over all of these years, especially with all the drastic changes we've seen the past couple of years. Being able to keep that culture in place, I think, speaks volumes about what kind of coach he is.
Yeah, in terms of the recruiting, he mentioned that he had said to some particular recruiter, maybe a handful of recruits this summer, that he was talking about what Clemson looked like when he got there. And he said, we hadn't won the ACC in 20 years, hadn't won 10 games in 20 years, and they can't believe it because they know nothing about that. That's not the Clemson they know.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to something C.J. Spiller said the other day. He was talking about recruiting a little bit, and it's the parents that remember his playing days, so not so much the kids. And that kind of really stuck out to me. It really hits home and lets you know how old you're kind of getting there.
Yeah. It does, because I don't think of C.J. Spiller as some, guy from ancient history by any stretch.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. He probably talked for a half an hour on Tuesday, and to me, that was the one thing that really stuck out to me. Was he said, I thought, the parents remember me as a player, but the kids not so much. I can't remember exactly how he said it, but it was something to that effect. We all got a good chuckle out of that.
Well, you go from being a kid to being like a 20-year-old like that, and that's what happens, because when you talk about the guys that they're recruiting right now, they were little kids when Taj Boyd and that group turned the program around. That was 10 years ago, 10, 11 years ago. They were 5, 6 years old.
Yeah, they don't know anything of all those lean, mediocre years before Dabo Swinney took over. That's for sure.
Absolutely.